So the identity of things, this is one of our newer topics. We've been working on it for about 3 months now. And rather than trying to explain what it is, I've put a definition up there from TechTarget. Identity of things is an endeavor that involves assigning unique identifiers with associated metadata to devices and objects, enabling them to connect and communicate effectively with other entities over the internet. We talked about identity and access management this morning from the more personal data point of view, and it's a key building block in unlocking the IoT solutions market as well. Again, put some numbers in there. The overall identity and access management market, according to ABI research, in 2022 will be around 21.5 billion. And some key areas looking at on IoT would be industrial manufacturing, automotive, telematics, fleet management, home security, and automation. So identity is a complex and challenging area. It's ever-changing and problematic when deployed at large scale. And bear in mind the sorts of numbers we were talking about for connected IoT devices. The figure could be even greater. Like I mentioned a little while ago, if we start connecting objects like cigarette packets, tablets, T-shirts, whatever, they will all need identity. Identity and access management's traditionally looked at the relationship between humans and machines, but now with IoT, it has to cover the relationship between devices. So MEF has been working with members in this area to build knowledge around identity of things and to look at what potentially is best practice in identity of things. So a couple of observations. First of all, that outdated identity and access management software could hinder the development of the IoT market. And what do these platforms do? Essentially, they verify identity and they have the access permissions of users and devices. Quite a few of these platforms can be quite old, no longer fit for purpose if there is a rapid growth of IoT devices and applications. Simply put, the volume of connections coming on board is too great for these platforms to cope with. I think the figure of over 80% of connected cars having IoT connectivity now is not far off the mark, and even that level of connections could render the platforms obsolete. So we're seeing currently that enterprises are in quite a defensive mode in allowing devices, things onto their network that are beyond the boundaries of the enterprise. They're very worried by this, and we'll need to progress from permitting and denying access to these things to a more flexible, agile, and scalable approach. So what are we seeing? Identity platforms of the future, what are they going to look like? They'll need to be modular, so they need to manage the complexity of multiple users, devices, access points, and characteristics. They need to be highly scalable, managing the exponential growth of devices, and flexible in corresponding to a fluctuating volume of users, things joining the network, things leaving the network. They'll need to operate across borders. An IoT platform needs to be an anytime, anywhere connection that's secure, and it should have context sensitivity, so allowing real-time access from non-standard devices or sites. So some of the issues we're seeing on identity, looking at best practice. We're not going to be recommending from a systems point of view, but in terms of the principles we're looking at, some of the areas that are coming to light: source code, access and restriction, third-party access, permission of trusted sources, adding and removing users, and user ID credentials. So very much we found in identity that there's not a lot out there at the moment. Simple Google searches on identity of things. We're not getting much commentary from analyst firms about it. And it's certainly an area that MEF feels is worthy of more exploration, and we are interested to move the debate forward and support the development of the identity of market. And we've got expertise on the other side of the room on the personal identity side of things, and we're in discussion about how the principles of personal identity might apply to the identity of things. Right, I'll let Dario give you his observations.
Well, asking, do you have any observations so far on identity of things? It's one of the big mysteries, which is actually one of the most talked mysteries so far we found in IoT, because everybody agrees that there is a requirement inbuilt, and not just the security requirement we talked at the beginning, or the access requirement. As a third is, well, how do you organize within a specific service or wider access to things? It is not the Internet of Things, after all, if it's not equally accessible for everybody. There is a web address, everybody can access it. So what if you want to communicate with lamppost out there, and then should be a public lamppost? How do you know it's a lamppost? How do you know you share it? How is it probably regulating temperature has got lots of information that everybody could use and it could publish. But even if you want to make it public, it's not available because nobody knows how to access it. There is no standard. There's no World Wide Web of the Internet of Things, even if a World Wide Web is there. So maybe there needs to be a consistent way to approach it, because the tools are there. You could publish it, you could publish a web page, you can have an API, you can have an RSS feed, for all it matters. But sometimes this concept of identity that we've now seen managed and utilized as a digital identity that exists by itself for persons is very similar to what we're talking here. So much that some of our members, one of them has worked for, we shouldn't use the word blockchain too much, I understand, but a blockchain identity solution for a large telecom operator in the IoT fields. And this operator, which is reselling to others, to a specific vertical right now. And this one is really an opportunity to tell you within, right now, your closed circuit, but you know exactly what these things are. And similarly, you can say, this device, I've now lost it, and this device will not be recognized as hours of work. Or the metadata associated with it changes. And I want everybody within our industry, or our company, to be able to call directly and check what things are doing without having to go through a series of different gatekeepers. As long as you have the right credentials, as long as you got the right rights, you should be able to do it. All of that brings us a lot of questions. Now, MEF, very clearly, we don't do standards. So we don't know how that's going to be doing. But we do know that the power of these is limited in two fields. One is you securely and say, I want to have my own solutions for my own things because it becomes more secure. It's not open. Or vice versa, I said, I believe there's going to be cross-pollination of ideas because I want these services to be available, or these data to be available to everybody else, maybe. And how do I do that? How do I publish information from things? That question is not completely resolved. And it might well be just a question of somebody sticking their heads and saying, let's do it this way. Between the two, there is lots of gray areas in between. We want to know more about what people are doing. So one of the first things we'll start doing is talking about it as in, apart from the theoretical approaches, what are the real things happening in the world. As we said, there are some solutions right now taking place, being, obviously, there's always, as you were saying, an access management somewhere where there's always, and it could be a phone number for all it matters, the unique identifier, but the question is, how do you manage everything else around it? You know, the metadata that you might associate with it as well. And how do you feel, how do you request it back, etc. So theoretical questions, plenty, but some real life examples available as well. And through the next few months, we're going to start publishing them. Yeah.
Sorry for being here all the time. Just some thoughts. Just some immediate thoughts, and they're not new. I've had them for a while. But you were talking. If you talk about personal identity, and it's a very different thing, right? Because personal identity can be anything from what your preferences are as a person, and your personal profile is if you like, to your government identity, and there are various degrees of personal identity, and it's much more than an identifier, which you talked about in your definition here, identifiers. And of course, with personal identity, you even have GDPR, and you have those requirements, which probably do not apply to IoT. There are other requirements to IoT, though. So there are different regulations as well. But immediate thought here is that I think what we need is we need to have an identity architecture, because I don't think it would be nice if you could address every device, from somewhere. That means that they need to have a unique identifier somehow. Problem is that there's no one defining those unique identifiers. I mean, in telecoms, you have the ITU doing the mobile numbers, and you have ICANN doing the internet addresses, etc. And they're not really the best of friends either, I think. So I don't think there are any unique identifiers that would cover anything, but that would be nice to have. But it would also be nice to have a conceptual architecture on how identifiers link together. And that's probably a starting point, would be for me, because then with that starting point, you would then create various degrees of relationship management between different identifiers, and then you would have different players that could play those roles in the ecosystem as well. So, to agree on that will be difficult, but I think it would be a good starting point.
Do you want to? Well, I think you're right. I think you're right that there is a lot of differences. We shouldn't draw a quick conclusion. I think one of the main differences, sometimes you said there are different elements of classes of information you want to share. And I think the same apply to identity of things. There are different identities, there are different classes of identities, there are different relationship you want to show or not to show for different things. One thing that I think it's important to actually say that everybody of us, human beings, we have an identity, or most of us have been issued by government an identity. And we can self-claim our identity. If you ask me, I should be able to reply in most cases. The things don't do that. So actually having identity for them is actually one of the first things. You're even more likely to need one at one point. But the structure and the architecture is what we don't have. We're going around, we don't like to invent things ourselves too much. So we're going around and trying to find if anybody else has got, or if there's anywhere, somewhere at the beginning of a discussion where we can join in and bring all the feedback from our companies as well. Because we identify these, identity and security can kind of live together, and as well as identity and attributes. You have one identity. The question is what you associate with this identity. The problems of GDPR, we've actually been asked as a workshop question, is actually there's a lot of IoT back to you need to evaluate, which is GDPR compliance. Your things might be carrying data which is your personal data. So it might be your personal things. They carry their own data, but that's your data too. I think there's a question. And legally, you're equally responsible to delete them, keep them, transfer them in any case. So all of those still are being applied to some part of GDPR, but it has to be linked back to somebody, so to a person. There is no protection except for one country. I think only in Brazil, and Rafa will tell us. GDPR is applied. No, sorry, South Africa. Got it wrong. In South Africa, GDPR equivalent law is applied to companies. and to inanimate objects which have got ownership or something. So it would apply equally to things. A bit early for us to start on that, but on the things having ethics and so on. But so it be in South Africa. You have your own rights, even if you're not a human being on data. What do we do next with that? Good feedback, structure. So what are we going to be doing? Anybody else before as well that wants to chip in, please do say.
Well, the plan is to come up with what is the best practice and identity of things. That's the publication we're going to be looking at developing over the coming months. We also have a webinar ahead, which isn't till June, but date for your diary if you're interested, exploring the themes, and by that stage we'll have explored them a little bit more. I'd like to also pick up on the question of things having identity, and I mean certainly Intel put thought into this. You may have come across the term zero-touch onboarding, zero-touch provisioning, where essentially an identity is given to a chip at the point of manufacture, which stays with that device throughout its life. And the idea is that you can use this identity to bring on these devices rapidly and in volume and manage them more easily. Clearly, when Intel started off, it was only Intel's business that its potential chip customers that it could serve, so it joined forces with ARM. So the two organizations now have quite a large base of chips that they can give identity to, and I mean certainly eases configuration, lowers cost, lowers time to market, some important consideration there. So that's a theme that we've been exploring recently, and we're picking up at a number of themes that our members are developing with us.
And back to the cross-pollinations of our different mobile ecosystem. It's got different areas and pockets, but our identity players, we found out they are doing IoT. Today we've seen Boku, which was a payment player, which is doing identity. And all of this kind of liquidity is still happening. So the two companies we were talking about, they were doing people identity, and they're now doing identity of things, because I think they can. It's their reapproaching a different aspects, a different technology for something else. And similarly, if you're offering a solutions, I think you might want to, accessibility being one of them, security we discussed today, so roaming for us, but taking as access, and security. And I think you might want to introduce in a question mark is, do I need to think of identity, or how do I fit into an identity role? A bit early, we assume, so we agree. But in terms of asking questions, we like that. Any other questions? Anybody else has got something to say, comment? Or no? Oh, just curious about something, so go ahead.
So, do you think about non-terrestrial access networks for IoT? I think it's a pretty hot topic right now. So, do you think of, low Earth orbit or even higher up? So, is that coming up in your discussions?
It's something that's in the melting pot of the soup of my thoughts.
Okay.
I was talking to someone a couple of weeks ago we started discussing the future of the telco, and his view was, well, actually the telco as we know it's going to disappear.
That no nations in space, So
No nations in space, and you'll actually get these kind of satellite systems that will provide connectivity to individuals and to things. So it's probably a little bit too far out for me to think about.
How much do you think? How much far out? Like 5 years or 50?
I think it's one of these things. Satellite's got a bit of a checkered history, really, as a service. It's always promised a lot of things moving forward, but not necessarily delivered.
That's true.
But say 5 to 10 years out, and certainly I'd see satellite as a useful technology for IoT and in those extremely hard to reach areas where mobile coverage just isn't possible.
Right. And another thing I was thinking about, if you were to ask me maybe 5 years ago, I would have said that mesh networks would be a constant now.
Yeah.
So we will have from access, let's say layer 1 mesh networks to applications. And that doesn't really happen. Everything gets, I think, more centralized and more, so from the application layer, talking to your central system API sort of thing, to access, which is mobile or LoRa. You have a gateway, you have your access networks. So what happened to the mesh networks? Speaking also of blockchain identities, sort of where you can query identity or find an asset's identity without actually talking to like a federated system that you need to go and ask. So yeah, just a thought. It's not like where are the mesh networks now? I'm not seeing them. Like yeah, light pole talking to light pole. Yeah.
You want?
I don't know if I can answer that question from a sufficiently technical.
We need to ask you more of that. Well, okay. One thing I said, we are seeing in consumer, which is where I didn't expect less. Actually, it's much more of a mesh network approach, because your Wi-Fi and Wi-Fi handovers is fantastic. Or the fact that you have GSMA over Wi-Fi, and you're using Wi-Fi on then you're fixed and your services are moving with you. Actually, that's a great example. So moving across, and that's not the mesh network, but close enough. Come back to where telco wanted to be, and I think the technology would have been there, but I think, like we were saying somewhere else, the commercial operations might not be there. Because if you start talking mesh networks and then you're combining networks, technically is exciting and so on, but you're combining a cost which is super high because everybody wants a big pie, slice of a pie, then you start having a problem. And that's why you don't see them commercially happening, because everybody wants to maintain their margins. And these questions of who owns the customers and do I want to let you service my customers, and then it's becoming a bit of a, unfortunately, fallacy for the entire telecommunication systems. Is it because I will try to avoid that because I'm afraid that you're going to steal 5 customers and then 5 customers will move to somebody else. I think that's probably has been the biggest challenge. Not the technical stuff. Oops, that shows how little my technology knowledge goes, because these are not simple things. But my experience seems to be that usually it's more of a commercial story. We couldn't agree to something, rather than, in the end, a real need or real possibility to provide a better service to somebody. Wouldn't it be great to have LoRa, 5G, 4G, 2G, 1G, everything into one solution, maybe? Oh, that's what I'm thinking. But is it happening? No. No. Okay, so I was just checking in case you. But if somebody does, that's and I think that would be good news for the industry, and it would be a good level of maturity. And where we see back to the commercial agility and flexibility of some other players, where we'll say, maybe I can do something for you. And what they're all complaining is that this commercial flexibility is very difficult to get because they aggregate volumes. Maybe they can get something better, but they try to go and select others. And maybe some of you are doing that. So I think it's an exciting moment for somebody with a lot of entrepreneurial thinking. The industry needs to move faster. And then we say that everywhere move faster because the entire cycle is going faster. But so I understand. I don't think I'm the best person to answer your question. But if you ask me, I think there are other things at play rather than the technology itself that have limited.
Who's following who? In the sense that with a number of devices that are coming online, and we do see growth, I think we might at some point run into some fundamental, even physics problems. So, just transporting an IP packet from Canada to South Africa, because that's the way your application works, won't be. It won't make sense at some point anymore with the 25 billion devices that will come online. So I'm thinking localization will be more and more important in the future, and then how do you manage identity with a localized deployment, even if it's on a, like, let's say, carrier network. You won't want to have that kind of overhead, which will multiply with the number of devices. But there are also questions for me, so I'm not asking, but like for an answer for this, it's just topics that I want to throw out there.
But let me confirm some of it. I think when we were looking at roaming before, I was still surprised to hear that some of our roaming traffic for IoT things still does the traffic from or originated in country X back to the original product, and then go back, and I say, well, what a waste. What are we? Oh, because that's the way we do things. Well, you shouldn't do that. Actually, I hope we're not recording this bit, but we are. 5G has got lots of issues, and I think it will not be easy for many people. But one thing that 5G is doing, and probably it's going to be a wake-up call for a lot of them, is bringing edge networks back to the conversation for an operator, which is I need to start thinking, I'm not selling access anymore. I'm selling access here, and I need to do computational things in here. And that's a service I'm actually adding value. I'm actually being able to bring servers to the edge because I have a network with the edge. That would be a real transformation in telecom. So of all the things that 5G might not be as exciting right now for, and because of the spectrum frequency and so on, and on satellite as well, there's always a question of spectrum and what is available in the end as a limiting factor as well. And I think on 5G, that's a very limiting factor. But in terms of opportunity to turn around the telecom and the service delivery, 5G might actually have a bit of a silver lining there, a huge silver lining there. That's my thinking. But let's see. I still think that some of the telecom might be beaten even to edge network, if they're not careful, to some of the large international players that will rather be having their edge computing and network slicing and managing things for themselves. So more issues for the telecom if they don't move fast and do that. Or, once again, more opportunity for other people to step in and say, we will do that. We're going to do your edge network computing. We're going to do your patching of different networks. And we're going to do your quality of service with network slicing. And forget talking about telcos. They're just passive things in the back. I've been, as you can see, I've been working an operator for 15 years. I definitely fought against that tooth and nail. Did I win? No. But exactly, I think when the operator will stop thinking of themselves as a telco, and the OTT will stop thinking of themselves as the OTT, there we're going to have an interesting challenge. We go. I'm sorry. This is an open chat. I'm sorry if you want to sit down and relax. But no, we will both sit down. But yeah, we'll take this. I love going to Africa on a regular basis for our members because I learn new things every day. And what I learn is the biggest buyer of dark fiber in the world are not telcos anymore. They are OTTs. Google, Netflix, Facebook, they're buying fiber. And then I thought, oh, they're buying fiber. And I said, oh yeah, by the way, but do you know what they're also buying? What else? I mean, oranges. Oh, do you see all of those stacks over there? Oh yeah, it's your data servers. That's not really mine. That's the OTTs. So, and this is a telco telling me that. And I say, well, so what's the difference between you and them? They're running a bigger networks now globally than your network here. Well, no, they're paying me. And they say, well, good enough, thanks, that's great. And they're reselling some of it fiber back, some of it back. And I find all of this quite fascinating. And then if only a telco could stop thinking like being limited by being a telco. But they are sitting on a huge machine that is also a great cash cow, so I've been doing that as well, so would like to keep it and protect it, why not? But it is a limiting factor maybe sometimes. So. That was recorded. Yes. I will forever haunt it. Yeah, I will bribe our team and make sure that nobody will hear that, what I just said. But the more interesting thing is what you say right now. I think maybe we should look at the importance of a mesh and the edge network in our future view as well.
That's how working groups operate.
Exactly.
We raise issues, we debate them, we explore them, come up with a conclusion.
And never Yeah, the conclusion of what other people, the intelligent people say like you and somebody else. But don't trust me right now because I'm not the expert on either of those topics. So we'll wait and come back with some analysis. Anybody else would like to say something, to comments to close the day? Would you like the comments? And then I'll say something or I'll come up with something.
No, I'm good.
You're good. So if there are no other comments on the IoT sessions, time-wise we're doing quite good. We're a bit.
I think this comment you made about the OTT players becoming investors in dark fiber, it's an interesting topic. I recently found out that Facebook is a very large investor in Africa Mobile Networks, which actually nearly outsources a lot of the tower functions of mobile networks in Africa. So it would be very interesting to see how telcos are trying to move into the OTT space and the OTT space moving into the telco space as well. I know it's not necessarily an IoT topic for here, but it could be very much food for thought for some larger discussion as to the future of our business, our ecosystem. So yeah, food for thought.
True. We should put it on our agenda, and it's like a dream come true. Everybody could become an OTT now, but everybody can become a telecom. The only thing that really makes a difference is licensing. Maybe that will come down as well at one point. Exactly. You might be. Here we talk about it more. Yeah. According to European Union, it's true. It's coming actually. Well, not licensing, but we're still waiting for the actual laws to be implemented in every country. It's still not happening. Right? So, I'd like to thank you. Say a couple of things. I've heard today that the GSMA estimates are 25 billion IoT comings. But the GSMA estimates as well that next year Mobile World Congress will run exactly like the year before. And GSMA estimates that it will not pay back any of the exhibitors as well. Well, some of it, one of those will be true, one of those will be optimistic, and one of that will not happen. You choose which one it is. No, seriously, it has been a strange MWC, or un-MWC, or as you want to call it. We've been happy to be here to anchor a few people around, as you still made it. So glad that you can make to our events as well, and you could stay here, as soon we're going to have a bit of a networking event for the orphans, survivors of, etc. We hope to keep on having opportunities like MWC, which is great for the industry. We need a place to stay together, to meet new people, to find out, etc. It has been the lifeblood of the mobile industry, and I hope it will continue to be in whatever forms it will grow into. We will see that, and we'll hear more. But from my side, thank you again, and thank you to Celosis, because they hosted us here for 3 days. It's so good, we might stay here. You don't know, but we think we'll move our MEF office here as well. We like the weather. Look at this. I mean, come on. I mean, who wants to go back to London now? And thanks to Summit Technologies and Doug for helping us on everything else as well. It's been great to see that so quickly we could get together. And thank you to Andrew, but also to Joanne for organizing everything at the last minute, to Ian for today as well for personal data. So, and for everybody like you that came in, spoke, asked questions, and I hope it's going to be interacting, talking. Interacting means also drinking, as I keep on saying. So that's coming soon. I'll keep you 5 minutes. We probably set up the tables and so on. But stay here and let's talk. And I hope to see you as big supporter of MEF as well. In every of our working groups. All the information you need are on the website, but don't go on the website. Ask these people right now. They're great. So thank you. Thanks again.